Hello, I'm your host, Andrew White, and welcome back to Leading Our Own Way. This is Tuesday Truths, the bite-sized episode distilling the best of our conversation with this week's guest, Steven Trotter, Principal of the Year and author of The Art of Skimming Stones. Everything's in the show notes, please go and purchase. Steven's approach to leadership is all about trust, resilience, and putting people first. In just a few minutes, you'll get the essence of his wisdom, real, practical, and ready for you to apply in your own journey. Tune in, reflect, and let these truths move you to action. And if that's one of them is going watching part 1 of our yesterday's episode, and part 2 will drop tomorrow. Go and watch them all. Enjoy. Before we dive in, I want to give a big, massive shout out to our now new proud sponsor, Eshu Skincare, a brand that truly aligns with leading our own way. This Australian-born company is dedicated to keeping skincare simple, effective, and straightforward. They've made waves in the US, even landed in Macy's and over 300 stores, and now they're back with a renewed focus on healthy skin and real results. If you want authentic skincare that fits your lifestyle, check them out in the show notes. Thanks to Eshu Skincare for supporting real stories and mental fitness on Leading Our Own Way. And if you're interested in sponsoring like Eshu Skincare, drop us a message. We'd love to connect.
It definitely hasn't been a smooth road to get to where I am and to receive that award. And some of the pathways that I've been on and some of the people that I've either been in leadership environments with or workplaces or organisations or had to work with or for or whatever it is, have been really, really challenging. And in some of those cases, I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And had to work hard on finding my own motivation to continue to go. Like there was at one point there, I was going, look, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I need to take up real estate, or maybe I was starting to think maybe this job isn't for me. And that was a result of the environment that I was in. And it was quite a toxic, really conflicting environment. And there were people in there that would, I wouldn't say thriving, but they were going okay. But it really was the conflict between my values and the values of the people leading the organisation. Now, hindsight, I'll look back and I'll go, those experiences were some of the most deepest learning experiences that I had for various reasons. But particularly I learned, and I didn't know this at the time, but I learned the leader I never want to become. I learned how I felt in certain situations, and so I knew that I didn't want others to feel that way when I was leading them. So that combined with the fortunate of going, right, I've had these really tough, challenging experiences, but then equally I've had leaders that are absolutely amazing, and I still strive to be as good as them. And so because I've had those really diverse, varied experiences, I've been able to find myself in there and go, well, they're the parts of this experience I don't want to do, but here's examples of things that I do want to do, and what does that look like for me? What's my flavour when I walk into a staff room with my people? So I guess that's part of building the pathway to this, but ultimately the success of the environments I've worked have been the result of the people that are standing in my classrooms. And my job is to build their capacity and make sure they have the confidence, the skills, the resources, the supports, to be able to walk into that classroom and have the greatest impact possible. And that impact is varied. You're not, I was just reading something recently, it was a quote by Steve Goodyear, who said, harmony only happens when you've got everyone playing a different note. And when we're talking about harmony in the workplace, you want everyone to actually play a different note. You don't want the same note. You want that harmony. You want bits of everything. And so my role is to actually find what note they're playing and how can I actually enhance that? How can I make that part of the harmony? How can I bring them in? Even if it is a little bit left of center or a little bit out there, how do I take a breath, and what type of leader do they need me to be in order to get the best out of them? Because when I get the best out of my team, they're going to have a bigger impact in my learning environment. So I guess in a nutshell, award was probably a recognition of the building of teams and capacity to do the work. So it's definitely not a solo award. I definitely wouldn't have got to that point had my teams not embraced the work that we did and then moved forward with it.
They probably embraced it because they already felt safe around you, maybe.
Well, you've got to. It's a, you know, we're in an emotional business, and we've got emotional people learning in our environments, whether they're little people or big people or adult people, and then we've got emotional educators that are standing in front of them every day and are really committed and take what they do really seriously. And then we've got emotional families that are invested in their children's education. And then you've got emotional leaders that just want the best for their environment. And it's a real challenge to sometimes align all of that work. But you've got to be in an environment where people feel safe to be emotional, but understand that we're in a professional world, and we need to also have that balance of rational thinking with the emotional brain, with the problem solving, with the ability to go, this is hard, and go, yeah, it is. It is. Learning is hard. It's hard for our kids. It's hard for our adults. It's hard for our leaders. So I equally have to stand in front of my team and say, this is bloody hard. I actually don't know what to do here. How about we work it out? And that was something I learned over time, that, you know, I don't have to wear a different hat because I'm a leader in terms of personality. I'm still me, and I'm still Steve, and I'm still, you know, I still have my own challenges and things I'm working on, as do my staff. But they need to see that that's okay for me to be able to go, do you know what? I'm a bit vulnerable today. I'm not the expert. I'm not going to pretend to be the expert, but this person over here has a hell of a lot more knowledge on this than I do. So they're going to lead this work. And I'm going to equip them and empower them to do it.
You know, people say there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. Actually, I think there isn't. I think there's two distinctive things, and I'll break it up into two sentences for you. For me, confidence, the definition of confidence is the ability to see yourself as a flawed person, but still hold yourself in high regard. Now, if you take one of those sentences away, seeing yourself as a flawed person, and hold yourself in just high regard, that is arrogance.
Yeah.
And some people say, well, that's a fine line then. But putting those two sentences together, I think, is the perfect definition of confidence. And as a leader, I think we need to see ourselves as a flawed person. But of course, still stands tall. Still, as you said in your book sometimes, you know, bum out. I don't know if it was bum out. I can't remember how you said it now. But you know.
I stuff it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I stuff it up as much as anyone else.
Because you're human. Yeah. Right? And you're learning to be a leader, and that's where we get it also wrong. I think whether people are experienced in their role, the next natural, maybe natural is not the word, but the natural progression then is to become a leader. But not everyone, like Simon Sinek says, not everyone wants to be a leader. Not everybody should be a leader. There's a lot of learning that comes after you have that role, and we've got to be able to support that. And maybe that's why part of many reasons of why you created the skim model, which I know we'll dig into before we do come to the close, because we could talk about this all day. For sure. But yeah, it's like parenting as well, and I hate to say that, but you, in your experience as a teacher, as a principal, and my experience in my roles as well, I hate to say it, but it's the same with parenting. We all have the capacity to be a parent. We all have the capacity to be a leader. Should we all be a parent? Do we all want to be parents? No. Absolutely not. I mean, I've seen it in some schools where parents should definitely not be a leader, and that's not being mean. If you're, sexually abusing your child or leaving them around knives, and which I've seen and heard, and I've had people on the podcast that have been through that, those parents didn't deserve to have you.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, not to bring it down to another level.
No, but it's fact.
It is fact. Yeah.
Yeah. The reality is, I think, and we're talking about arrogance and confidence. I'm confident in what I do, but I'm also heavily confident in the fact I don't get it right a lot of the time. But
crystal clear in your model.
I think when you're talking about arrogance in that space, it's not you might know you've got it wrong, but you haven't acknowledged that you've got it wrong.
Yeah, next layer to it.
And so that's important, that when I stuff up, I have to own that stuff up. Whatever that looks like, whatever the ownership looks like. It might be going to apologise to the staff member because she caught me at a bad time, and I just was a bit snappy. I wasn't my best self, because they deserve a good version of me, and sometimes they're not going to get it not out of intent, but just out of whatever's going on. So I need to own that and go and make that right. I need to mend that relationship, because that's not on them, that's on me. So it could be as simple as that, or it could be as simple as I've, created a professional learning opportunity for my team that actually sucked, and it didn't achieve what I needed to. So stand up in front and go, do you know what? That wasn't what we were trying to get to today, so we're going to reset. And that's okay too, but I think there's the difference. The confidence in, I know the work and I'm comfortable with the work, and I know my team and I'm comfortable to lead my team, but I'm not going to get it right every time.
Absolutely.
And owning that, I think, is the difference between confidence and arrogance.
Absolutely. And on that note of getting to know people, if I was to ask your staff then, how would they answer that question of how did Steven get to know you? How do you think they would answer that?
How would they answer that? Well, I think they would answer it in a balanced way. I think my team know what they're going to get. It's not that, what day is it today? But I genuinely sit in my staff room at recess and lunchtime, and I ensure that my schedule allows for that. Doesn't mean it happens 100% of the time, but I make intentional decisions about where I sit, because I might want to sit next to someone or near someone that I need to talk to because I haven't connected with them for a while, or I show interest in the fact that there's stuff going on in people's worlds and kids, and VC, they're studying year 12 to go into university. But it has to be genuine. Fake interest is seen through like anything. I'm genuinely interested in the people that sit in my staff room because they're important to me. Not just for the success of my environment, but they're people that are relying on me to be a little bit of a beacon of light to help them achieve what they need to in their world, to leave the day feeling successful, to leave the day feeling accomplished. And I can either dampen that or I can enhance it. And so I take a genuine interest in the people that are sitting in my staff room because they are important to me. But when we owned the pubs, it was a random night that a gentleman stopped into the pub. They used to be able to get takeaway beers. Was on his way, not from Ballarat, but was from another town, and his mum lived in Ballarat. He was on his way to visit his mum, found that our pub was open as he went past, dropped in to get some beers to take back to his mum's. Unbeknownst to my parents and the patrons of the pub, he'd been followed by a very well-known, notorious bikie gang because he'd had some conflict with their members. And when he came into the pub, they were only in and out in about 2 minutes, but had baseball bats, iron bars, chains, and many of these members just came in, flooded in each door, said to the rest of the patrons, "We're not here for you." Each of them took one shot at him and left him on the ground, basically pretty much dead, and left within 2 minutes. Not a glass was broken. It was just genuine luckiness. I guess we look at it. If he'd stopped at another pub, it would have happened there. If he'd stopped at his mum's house, it would have happened there. He just happened to want a six-pack and stopped at our pub. Unfortunately, the local newspaper wrote it up as a rift between two rival bikie gangs and made the pub out to be a bikie pub and this notorious gang's home pub. Mum and Dad went from doing 300 meals on a Saturday night to the next night they had 6, and they were friends that had booked in. I recall we woke up in the morning, we were on the 3rd story. Dad woke us up. We used to go down to the kitchen to get brekkie before we headed off to school, and he was very clear. I was about 9. He said, "Right, go straight to the kitchen. Don't stop. Head straight in there." And being young me, that made me a little bit curious. So I've walked down, seen the police tape, and went into the bar and sort of saw the mess. And I just remember sort of Dad grabbing me, "I told you not to come here." and went back to the kitchen. The gentleman survived only because when one of the first hits he took to the head, and his head, when he fell, his head actually fell underneath, still connected to his body, underneath the pool table.
Cleared that
So majority of the shots were body shots, so it caved his head in, but he recovered. Now, I didn't really comprehend what had happened, and we had enough conversations to know there was an incident and we're all safe and etc. Now, as a result of that, Mum and Dad basically were bankrupt. So we moved to our family's best friends. We're spud farmers. We lived in their spud shed in a caravan. But again, coming back to, I guess, that idea of family, we thought it was the best adventure around. Like, I had the farm bike, I could ride around on the motorbike, and we're having a great time. And yeah, again, not until years later, I couldn't imagine what Mum and Dad were going through at that point, where their business had collapsed. There's some fairly significant health issues with Mum and Dad around that, in terms of, I recall we were driving down the highway at one point, and Dad had pulled over and had a panic attack on the side of the road. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I've spoken to him since, but because he heard a Harley Davidson coming.
Oh God, yeah.
So that set him off. But I reflect on that to go, well, what happened during that time with Mum and Dad? And we were going through, as a family, one of the hardest parts of our world. I didn't know that the bikies had cornered Dad down at the local shops and said if he testifies that they're gonna come and get his family. Until the pub sold, there were undercover detectives that were dressed as patrons sitting in there for protection. But then, obviously, going from a really thriving business that you've poured your heart into to living in a spud shed. But the interesting part about it, as kids, we were protected to a point where it was an adventure. I had no idea the financial ruins that were playing out. I had no idea the challenges that Mum and Dad were going through. And instead of, I guess, sitting on their hands, Dad went and started educating and took on a leadership role at the local TAFE, teaching cooking, and Mum went and became a principal. And that is, to be honest with you, one of the most brutal environments that I've ever been involved in. And the leadership there felt, it was very traditional, like sporting traditional, and I think international people would understand it's probably not unique to Australia, that it was, the coach traditionally was very much say as I do, say what I say goes. If I say jump, you jump. And it was very much the environment that if you can't handle the abuse from me, your coach, you're not going to handle doing this professionally. So it almost felt like, their goal was to see if they could break you.
You learnt a valuable lesson from that, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, it's unbelievable. Well, we were process driven, so everything had a process, and we were hammered process. So the rule book we knew inside and out. We tested on it weekly, and so everything was really heavily process driven. So that is now an embedded part of my world. Anything I do, I start to go, well, what's the process here? And there would be very few people that would argue, being a process driven person, process-driven leader is not a really great skill, and it is, but it's not always the best strategy. I reflect really, and this sort of hit home to me, it was a good few years ago now, but I had a grad teacher who, we had a process that we would follow for students that weren't meeting our expectations, and it was a really clear step-by-step process that supported the teacher to be able to manage, but then called for support if it got beyond those steps. And I got a note to say, look, they need some leadership support, and I came in and had a bit of a chat about what was going on, and noticed one of the steps in the process was missing. And so I asked the student to come for a wander so we could have a bit of a restorative conversation and work out what was going on to try and organise that. But I also gave a little bit of just gentle feedback to the teacher, say, hey, look, we've missed a step here. Probably if that was there, we may not have got to this point, but look, I'm here now, we'll get this organised. So had a chat, brought the student back in, had a chat with the teacher, and they started to mend the relationship a bit, got them back engaged with their work. Thumbs up, all the best. I'll be back to my office. And I reckon it was about half an hour later I got another one. Same student, came back in, chat to the teacher, went back through what she, the process of how she got to the note to me, and I noticed she'd missed another step in the process. So I provided, before I spoke to the student this time, I just sort of explained why it's important we follow this process, and I started focusing on the chart that we had, and I didn't quite notice immediately that I looked around and she was crying. And it was at that point I realised she didn't need a process, she needed a supportive leader. She was struggling. She just needed me to come in and give her a chop out and help her out a bit. And I didn't notice that. I went straight to process. Like, I'm overwhelmed, I was under the pump, I was doing some other things. And in my head I'm like, well, the process isn't being followed, so no wonder I'm being called in here when maybe this could be avoided if we were doing... And so I just owned that and got her into my office later that day and just said, look, I'm sorry. You know the process. I know you know the process. You were giving me a message and I didn't read it. So that's on me, not on you. So I talk about this idea of defaults. That's a default for me. And when I'm tired and overwhelmed, I'll 100% lean on process. But I also have to acknowledge that there's a dark side to that, or a shadow, that a process is not always the best approach. So being aware of that doesn't mean I don't fall into that space still, but it means I can get out of it a bit quicker before I have a staff member in tears because I have misread what they're trying to tell me. But still, it's something that's embedded in me, and I know that. And now my team know that because I've explained that to them. So if they see me falling into a trap where a process isn't the right response, but I'm leaning on it, I know that they're going to say to me, hey, Steve, maybe we rethink the strategy here. And it's just enough for me to go, no, actually, you're right. Yeah. So, we've always got to acknowledge that we sometimes see a process, if we spoke, it could be talked about as a strength, and it is. If it's used in the right time, right situation, right person, right event, but it also has a shadow that if it's not used at the right time, with the right people, for the right reasons, that it's not going to have the positive impact that you want it to.
What you just witnessed is only a snippet of our amazing conversation this week. This is what Leading Our Own Way is all about. Real stories, real transformation. If you're watching this before Wednesday, part 1 dropped yesterday and part 2 releases tomorrow. But if you're already here after Wednesday, all parts are available now. Head to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts and every other major platform and look for the numbers on the bottom left-hand corner of the episode's covers to start with part 1. Trust me, you don't want to miss this incredible journey.